Here, I'll tell you how I got sober, man. We'll get into it. You know, I've been talking about it for a while. There's never really like a right time to talk about that sort of thing, but I do want to be able to share it with you guys. Because sometimes people ask about it and wonder what's up, and then I'll just tell you how I got into that. I was born, my father was an old man. My dad was 70 years old when I was born, and my mother was 32. And they had 4 children. You know, when I was born, I think there was some shame or uncertainty by my parents. They had me call my dad by his first name instead of calling him Dad, because I guess maybe they'd gotten a lot of, you know, strange looks from people or judgment. And maybe they felt like that was a way that would make it easier on them and maybe on us too. But my father was very old when I was born. As I started to get to know him, I was just kind of scared because, you know, he was a senior citizen and we just kept getting older. Like, as I was getting older, he was getting older. And I remember walking to church one time, and I had to, like, walk him. Like, make sure he was okay where he was stepping. And so it just made me, I think, hyper-aware. When I was really young, I was very aware. And my mother worked a lot, and she wasn't really connected to me. You know, she just worked a lot, and she had to work. You know, she had 4 children. And my parents got divorced, and we moved to like a poor area. And I guess I just started to feel like ashamed. You know, I felt ashamed of the fact that my family was poor. I felt ashamed that my dad was old. You know, couldn't be like as much a part of my life in a lot of ways, because physically it was hampering to him, and then because my parents were separated and then he wasn't around. And, you know, I started making up stories. Making up stories. I would tell people stories to make my life different than it was. I started making up stories. Making up stories. I would tell people stories take the school bus sometimes to a different neighborhood and get dropped off and then walk. Because I didn't want people to see where I lived. I started riding my bike to school. I'd ride my bike maybe 5 miles to school. When I was in middle school. You know, and that's 5th grade, and maybe that's not wild, but at the time it didn't feel wild to me. You know, it felt like this is what I need to do to feel okay. So, you know, my peers won't judge me or... So I just felt, you know, I just felt less than. I didn't know anything about myself, how to feel good about myself. So the only way I knew to feel good was if I could make you like me. I could make you like me. I needed you to like me. I only decided how I felt based on how you felt about me. And it went from moment to moment. And they may not even have been judging me. I just felt, I don't know, I guess I just felt judged. I felt less than, I don't know. Sometimes I didn't really feel anything. But I knew that if I showed up at school on the poor bus, then people knew I was poor. And I already felt bad enough because nobody was telling me in my world, like one of my parents, that I could feel okay about myself. There wasn't a father around. And this isn't a sob story I'm trying to tell you guys. I'm trying to tell you how I ended up getting into Alcoholics Anonymous. For me, I'm not saying you need to do this. I don't know your life. I don't know your world. Doing an 8-ball right now and listening to this, bruh, and eating, you know, and eating somebody's butt, you matter, whatever, do your thing. 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 I'm not judging you at all, man. I wish I was right there with you. One day I may be back. But for now, this is where I am. So I just felt, you know, I just felt less than. I didn't know anything about myself, how to feel good about myself. So the only way I knew to feel good was if I could make you like me. I could make you like me. I needed you to like me. How I felt based on how you felt about me. And it went from moment to moment. And so I was a storyteller because I wanted my life to be different to other people. And so I told stories. And also I liked making people laugh. Because I knew that if they were laughing, then they were okay with me. They couldn't be hating me and laughing at the same time. I had a younger sister who was very ill. She was born with a rare liver disease and she needed a liver transplant upon her birth. And so When my mother did have free time, a lot of time my sister got the affection because she was ill. And she got a lot more love and affection than my other brother and my other sister did, I felt like. Anyhow, I was, growing up, and one thing I really loved was summertime. I would go to YMCA summer camp. It was a group of kids in the summer that just wanted to have fun, wanted to have fun, wanted to have fun. It was a group of kids in the summer that just wanted to have fun, wanted to have fun. Summer camp. It was a group of kids in the summer that just wanted to have fun, wanted to have fun. It was a group of kids in the summer that just wanted to have fun, wanted to have fun. Summer camp. And at summer camp, things weren't as cliquey. Everybody was on the same page. We got to do fun stuff. We all, rode on a bus together from the camp to go to field trip. It was a group of kids in the summer that just wanted to have fun, wanted to have fun, wanted to have fun. It was a group of kids in the summer that just wanted to have fun, wanted to have fun. Summer camp. It was a group of kids in the summer that just wanted to have fun, wanted to have fun, wanted to have fun. It was a group of kids in the summer that just wanted to have fun, wanted to have fun. And I just loved that. It just wasn't as judgmental. My mom would drop us off there and we'd stay there and go to summer camp. It just felt like less judgment. And one day I was walking in my neighborhood, and one of the counselors from my summer camp drove down the street. He happened to be driving through my neighborhood, and he saw me. Our neighborhood was poor, man. It was, I think it was the poorest white neighborhood that was around us, I felt like. And then when I saw him at summer camp, he was joking with some of the other counselors. He was making fun of where I live. He was making fun of the place he saw me run out of, the apartment I ran out of. And it just, at that point, like something inside of me just really kind of died. Something. Here was this one place where I really felt kind of okay. And now that place didn't feel okay to me anymore. It was a group of kids in the summer that just wanted to have fun, wanted to have fun, wanted to have fun. It was a group of kids in the summer that just wanted to have fun, wanted to have fun. Summer camp. It was a group of kids in the summer that just wanted to have fun, wanted to have fun, wanted to have kids. And it was a group of kids in the summer that just wanted to have fun, wanted to have fun. Summer camp. And I was a storyteller. I was always concerned though, I always needed to be around more people. Where everything was always starting to be, we need to change this, we need to do that. I'd go to a party and then I'd have to go to another part, where's the party? Well, we're at the party. I had some great times. I was having fun. But on the inside, I didn't know who I was at all. I didn't have any beliefs. I didn't have any real values. And how I felt about me was based upon how you felt about me. And when I was 14, I got emancipated. I couldn't live at my family's home anymore. My brother had moved away to live with my grandparents, and he and I weren't close. After he'd moved away, I'd spent a lot of time in our room by myself. And it made me, I think, real sad because my brother's bed was in there, and my bed was in there. And every kind of year, every 6 months, he would say, and my mom would say he might come back and live with us again, and he didn't come back. And I don't fault him for it or anything. He had his own walk with our environment, and he needed to find a place for him to be well. And he's gotten very well over the years. And something never felt okay. Never felt okay. I just never felt okay. I always felt like I was trying to make things okay. Never felt okay. Never felt okay. I just never felt okay. I always felt like I was trying to make things okay. And anyhow, but it all, I was just in this room, and I wanted things to be different, and I was a scared kid, And this before I moved out of my mother's home, and I just remember being really scared. I remember being at night that, our neighborhood was scary, and it was just, we grew up like it was, kind of poor white and poor black was right over from us. And it was just, it was scary. When people get real impoverished, things get scary. And I was just scared. And at night I was a scared kid. I remember, I would wet the bed all the time, And I remember one time when I was young, I heard that if an animal had urinated somewhere, that other animals couldn't come get that animal. And so I remember at that point, sometimes I would urinate off my bed, around my bed in a big circle at night, so that things couldn't come get me. Something never felt okay. Never felt okay. I just never felt okay. I always felt like I was trying to make things okay. Never felt okay. Never felt okay. I just never felt okay. I always felt like I was trying to make things okay. I was just creating this crazy world inside of me that was a lot of fear, and there was a lot of uncertainty, and there was not a lot of systems inside of myself to make myself feel okay. My mother and I were just disconnected, man. She gave us birthdays and she gave us holidays, but she had to work hard. And I think that she, I don't know. I don't know if she had the tools really to make me feel loved.
I don't know if she had the tools really to make me feel loved.
So anyhow, I got emancipated at 14. I ended up living with a family for the first time. I had my own room, and I had peace. I had some peace in my life. I mean, just like moments where I just felt like I could relax a little bit. But this thing inside of me of not feeling okay was still very much there. You know, I developed issues with women where I had a really tough time relating to women and trusting women and feeling okay and really being able to commit to relationships. And at some point, life went on, things were going okay. But I started using cocaine. Using cocaine a little bit. And I liked cocaine because I would get it and do it by myself at home. At night. And it just made me feel good, and I didn't have to be around other people. I don't know, it just made me feel something. It made me feel something. And for so long inside of myself, I'd had so many years really of creating my own feelings on the outside of me, but not really having them inside of me. You know, like I just didn't have feelings inside. Like if I wanted to feel something, I had to think it up and then act it out and display it as I'd seen it displayed in like television or movies or from others. But the inside of me, there wasn't a lot going on. Life went on, things were going okay. But I started using cocaine. Using cocaine a little bit. You know, life went on, things were going okay. But I started using cocaine.
Using cocaine a little bit. Using cocaine. Using cocaine. Using cocaine. Using cocaine a little bit. Using cocaine. Using cocaine. Using cocaine. Using cocaine. Using cocaine.
So anyhow, wasn't getting crazy in the drugs or anything like that. But I had one night where I ended up in a taxi cab and a woman said something to me, kind of rejected me in like a mean way. And I hadn't done anything wild, I just expressed some interest and she expressed interest and then I returned the expression and then she was mean to me. And she didn't reject me, rejection is fine, but she was mean to me also. The taxi driver dropped her off, we were in a taxi. Next thing you know, I end up with the taxi driver. 4 hours later, me and him are doing cocaine together, and I'm driving the taxi. He's in the back with an escort. He bought me an escort, I don't want no escort. You know? Luigi, that was the guy's name. And we're in North Harlem and I'm driving a taxi, and the meter is still running, I'm still paying for that taxi. It wasn't getting crazy, but I had one night. Wasn't getting crazy, but I had one night. And that morning I was in New York because I had to be on a big radio show called the Opie and Jim Norton Radio Show. And they had like 1 million listeners and it was a huge opportunity. If you'd have asked me the night before, hey man, are you gonna stay up all night partying before you go into the radio, I'd have said, no way. I would never do that. And then here I was in this moment, and it's 5 a.m., I gotta go to the radio, you know? I mean, I got to my hotel after driving taxi and then paying for it. Dude, just blown out of my mind, dude. I couldn't feel my face with either hand. At first I thought something was wrong with my hands, but then I realized something wrong with my face. I get to the radio station. Dude, I took 3 showers in 10 minutes before I went there. So you know you want some really svelte dust if you're taking 3 showers in 10 minutes and drying off between each one. And that's cocaine, papa. Wasn't getting crazy, but I had one night. I had one night. I had one night. Wasn't getting crazy, but I had one night. station, and I can't even talk. And the other guest for the day was Darryl Strawberry, Hall of Fame baseball player. And you can look him up, and he's one of the greatest baseball players ever, but his career was really altered by cocaine. And here he was, I was on the radio with him. I had collected his cards when I was young, and I couldn't even talk. The main gift that God had given me was my voice, and I couldn't even use it because I've been up all night just using drugs to feel good somehow. Using drugs to feel good somehow. Using drugs to feel good somehow. Or using drugs to feel anything. Using drugs to feel good somehow. Using drugs to feel good somehow. Using drugs to feel good somehow. Or using drugs to feel anything. Wasn't it crazy? I had one night. Had one night. Had one night. Wasn't it crazy? I had one night. Had one night. Had one night. To the radio station, because I'd always thought in my head, oh, Darryl Strawberry, you thought about him and you thought, oh, he's on drugs, he's this and that, he ruined his life. But then here he was in front of me. He was 13 years sober, he was eloquent, successful, and I mean, he was a dang king sitting in front of me. And at one moment, that's where some things lined up in my life. That's where some things lined up in my mind and said, oh, hey, look, here you are with this gift you think you have, that you can communicate. You can't even talk because you're fucked up, right? Because you've been out driving taxi. And here you are with somebody who you had judged as being fucked up. And here he is, a king. And it just lined things up in a perfect moment where I just had this moment of like, oh, I need to... something needs to change for me. The next day I was back in Los Angeles. I was telling that same story to someone, and they said, hey man, I go to these meetings. And so then I went to some AA meetings, and for the first time in my life I sat down and listened to people tell stories, which were my favorite thing to hear. My whole life I've been loving stories, man. I love your story. You know, whatever your story is, I love it, man. Because all my life when I was young, I just wanted a different story. I wanted a different story. I love your story. You know, whatever your story is, I love it, man. Because all my life, I just wanted a different story. I wanted a different story. I love your story. You know, whatever your story is, I love it, man. Because all my life, I just wanted a different story. I wanted a different story. Whether I had to tell it or try and live yours, whether I had to get emancipated and come live at your house or this house or that house, I just wanted a different story, man. I wanted to be in a family, and I wanted to feel loved, you know? You know, I just really, I think, and I didn't even know it. I didn't know how much I wanted to, how much I wanted to be loved, and I just didn't even know it. And once I got into these rooms, you had to sit there, you had to be quiet, you had to hear other people. And people started talking and telling their stories, and for the first time in my life, they were telling emotional, like, tales that were exciting and fucking dope and like deep and real. And I connected with that. I loved it. I love your story. You know, whatever your story is, I love it, man. Because all my life, I just wanted a different story. I wanted a different story. I love your story. You know, whatever your story is, I love it, man. Because all my life, I just wanted a different story. I wanted a different story. You know, I loved it in that. So I just kept going. just kept going. Next thing you know, I had a couple nights in a row, or a couple weeks in a row, or months in a row where I was spending time with other people and I was meeting people, and suddenly Los Angeles became like this place that I'd always kind of hated and judged. It became a little bit, I still don't like that place. People are out of their fucking minds out there. Bunch of disconnected kooks judging most of the rest of America. But it also made me, it gave me a place to kind of, it just gave me friends, it gave me people. And because I knew those people had struggles, I knew that they'd felt some of the same ways that I felt inside, I couldn't judge those people, you know? Even though sometimes I wanted to. I love your story. You know, whatever your story is, I love it, man. Because all my life, I just wanted a different story. I wanted a different story. I love your story. You know, whatever your story is, I love it, man. Because all my life, I just wanted a different story. I wanted a different story. You know, you'd have a dude come in and like, he'd lost his family, or he'd lost his kids and been taken away by the courts, and he's drinking, or a woman who addicted to heroin, and finally they're getting their lives back together, and you know, they say like, listen for the similarities, not the differences. In my life, sometimes I'd always wanted to listen for differences, because differences gave me an ability to separate me from other people. And if I'm just me by myself, then I know that I'm okay. Because it's the only thing I've ever known. The only way I've ever been okay really is by being by myself. I don't know an okay where I'm attached to others. You know, where I trust others at like a place deeper than my own feelings, a place that I don't really know. But for the first time in these rooms, I could do it. You know, for the first time in these rooms, like I started like, man, I had love for people that did not even know. And then, in moments, and still this stuff kind of comes slow, but I start to have love for myself, you know. And the hardest thing for me to do in my life has been to love myself, because, you know, somewhere in my life, in my story, or when I was young, or I don't know when, you know, I think just because of, you know, maybe my dad being so old, and, you know, my mom not feeling like my mother cared about me, or whatever. It's not a sob story, I'm not telling you that, but I'm just telling you that I never really loved myself, because I never really loved myself because I never really loved myself because somewhere in my past, and like a long time before that, I never really loved myself because I never really loved myself because I never really loved myself because you know, I just have felt like I wasn't worth it. You know, and it's sad, it's tough to kind of admit some of that. And it wasn't a choice I made even like consciously. It's not like somebody said, hey, are you worth loving yourself? I would have said yes. But somewhere deeper than that, like somewhere when I was young, or when, I don't know, but just somewhere before that, you know, I just decided that I wasn't, you know, I just looked at my surroundings, and I don't know, I just had felt, or my life, or whatever the recipe was that was in my life, I looked at that, and I was like, oh yeah, you're you don't deserve, or you're not good, or you're bad, you're a bad person, or something. I don't know. I still don't know. There's still a lot for me to learn. Anyway, this story is a little bit emotional for me, but this is the story that I tell. I never really loved myself because I never really loved myself because I never really loved myself because somewhere in my past and like a long time before that, I never really loved myself because I never really loved myself because I never really loved myself because you know, I just have felt like I wasn't worth it. This is the story that I tell. This is the story that I tell. And look, I wasn't a cokehead. I have friends that are cokeheads. I mean, my coke use was probably, it was over a couple years, maybe once every few months. Maybe 3 times a year, 4 times a year. But then there was a point over about 3 weeks, or maybe 6 weeks, I don't know, where it had escalated. It was just kind of like once a week, and then it was like 2 or 3 times a week, you know? I mean, I'm pissed. Sometimes I'm like, fuck, I wish I never even got to smoke crack. You know, I don't want to be a crackhead, but fuck. You know, I'll take a hit or two just to see it, you know, what everybody's talking about. Down at the bus, down at the Greyhound, you know? But since then, you know, in this program I've learned, like, you know, I don't feel as alone as I used to. I'm learning to have different feelings about myself. Different ways to think about myself. I don't feel as alone as I used to. It's a program of action though, like I have to work and I have to like go to, you know, some of these meetings. And I go to the meetings, man, it's so funny that God used, or my higher power, people say higher power, God, whatever. You know, I believe in God, I believe in God. You know, it's so much out here in like this business I'm in, they try to like make me feel like it's not cool to do that, but I'm not gonna feel that way. Because I need that. You know, in the program too, that, you know, the AA, it's cool because it's not about the drugs and alcohol, man. You know, I never liked drinking. You know, I was never a pothead. I just started to see like, oh man, if you'd have asked me one day, will you go to this great opportunity you have on this radio station with one of the biggest radio shows in the world, would you go on that fucked up? I'd have said, no way. And then here I was doing something that I wouldn't have done. But that's when I realized, like, I wasn't even doing things that I really wanted to be doing. I don't feel as alone as I used to. sometimes I don't even want to admit that. You know, there's something inside of me sometimes that wants to make me separate from other people, you know? There's something that wants to make me alone because it's part of the only way that I ever knew how to be. And man, it has been a journey. The drugs and alcohol has been whatever. I don't know if I'll always be sober, I have no idea. But the thing that keeps me involved is I get to learn so much about myself, about loving others, about acceptance. It's introduced me to other issues that I have that, you know, maybe drugs and alcohol aren't even my issue. It's just introduced me into a world of like introspection. Like for the first time I can take a look at myself. And I still look, I got a ton of faults, I'm not. But I know that if I stay like on this path that things can get better. I believe that, because there's proof for me. You know, my career has gotten better. You know, I've met people that have loved me. You know, I've been in and out of a relationship with somebody that loved me. For one of the first times in my life that I really felt that. Not that other people hadn't loved me in the past, but this was the first time I could feel it. You know? And it's just because something had changed inside of me. You know, where I didn't need to just have all these walls up or whatever to survive anymore. Like, you know, I think my higher power wants to tell me, look man, you're gonna be okay. You know, you can take a break. Anyway, you know, I don't know if I'll always be a part of this program or not. But, you know, for the first time in my life, I can tell you a true story. Like this story, like that's a true story. You know, for the first time in my life, I can tell you a true story. Like this story, like that's a true story. The years of like having a lie and like be ashamed of who I was or what I was or anything like that. It's still okay to tell stories. It's okay to create and want to bring people together and be a storyteller and think about things, and that's all okay. But for the first time in my life, I have a little bit of a story of my own. You know, and there are moments, you know, not always, but there's moments where I don't feel as ashamed of myself as I did for so long, man. You know, I was so ashamed of myself for nothing. Really for nothing. Just because at a young age, nobody had told me not to be ashamed of myself. You know, nobody had told me, hey man, you're okay. You know, nobody had told me, hey man, you are okay. You're not a bad person. You're not a bad person. Because for so much of my life, I wanted to know that about myself. And now I go into these rooms and I hear other people's stories and I feel a certain way. And there is proof right there. Inside of me, living inside of my body. Through feeling and through love. And that's dope, man. Shit is fucking dope. For the first time in my life, I can tell you a true story. Like this story, like that's a true story. You know, for the first time in my life, I can tell you a true story. Like this story, like that's a true story. say in that program, more will be revealed. You know, when you can develop a relationship with a higher power, you can do what you want. They got coffee, they got shitty cookies. It's a fucking trap house, but where people get together to share good time. Real time. You know, I'm so excited, man. I get to go home. I got 5 nieces and nephews today that love me, you know? And even if they don't, I get to watch like my siblings be parents. You know, I get to watch my siblings love their children in a way that we never got to experience. And I'm awake for that. And that's cool, man. That for me, man, this shit is a ride, bro. And that's cool, man. That for me, man, this shit is a ride, bro. Sometimes they say, you know, you're not supposed to talk about sobriety in a public forum and stuff like that, but whatever, man. You know, I've never been somebody to follow really the rules, I don't think. Sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. And I'm grateful, man. I'm grateful to the group of people that I get to be a part of now, even in my own shows. You know, at our shows, we get to do that. And I feel like we're gonna do a lot of cool stuff in the coming year to help others. And that's cool, man. That for me, man, this shit is a ride, bro. And that's cool, man. That for me, man, this shit is a ride, bro. And again, if you party and you drink and you getting fucked up, if I'm at your house, you're doing coke, I don't care, that's fine. If y'all shooting up, I'm leaving, bro, okay? If you fucking wrote haystack on your arm and you fucking needling yourself, I'm out, daddy. But if you guys, you know, your cousins on fucking 9 Tylenol and y'all blowing a blunt in the G-Raj, bro, I'm fine. You know, I don't care if you drink, I don't care if you fucking, you know, pour meth down your fucking stepdad's, you know, esophagus. That's okay. You can do whatever. You don't have to adjust any of your life for me, anything like that. There's nothing you have to be weird around these kind of people. And that's cool, man. That for me, man, this shit is a ride, bro. And that's cool, man. That for me, man, this shit is a ride, bro. You know, my biggest problem, I realized it wasn't with drugs or alcohol. My biggest problem was with the way that I felt. And I am relieved of some of that. And I'm learning more all the time, man, and that's where I'm at. You know, that's where I'm at. And I'm so thankful that in a weird way, like all those times of storytelling and lying to people and just, you know, I just wanted to seem okay to them. Lying about, you know, where my dad was or who he was, or lying about why I was walking through somebody's neighborhood after school because I didn't even live in that neighborhood, you know? And just, all kind of stuff, man. You know, it's interesting because all that time of storytelling now, you know, the things that didn't serve me before, now it serves me. Now I'm able to go to a place and share stories. And that's cool, man. That for me, man, this shit is a ride, bro. And that's cool, man. That for me, man, this shit is a ride, bro. You know, God works in mysterious ways, man, and also in unmysterious ways, but also in way motherfucking mysterious ways.